Thank you. I would have to apologize. I will try to keep it short, but I'm not sure if I can be as concise as Joshua. And I also have to apologize because I have a number of slides, but exactly the reason is I know I'm the last speaker today, so I try to keep a lot of flashy, colorful slides so that it keeps you awake. So I want to talk today about a project which I'm running with a team at CERN, which is called the Sponsoring Consortium.
There are two microphones. One of them must be closed.
Okay, let me try that. Does it work better?
You must close one of them.
Can I close them? Does it work now? Okay, excellent. So a project we are running at CERN called the Sponsoring Consortium of Open Access Publishing in Particle Physics. As it is so long, we just call it SCOAP3. And SCOAP3 is one of these few open access initiatives where, at least I believe, it's quite successful, because it's delivering exactly what Lars was asking for in the morning, an immediate open access to the finally published article. And to understand how it's working and how we did it, I believe it's interesting for you to see where we come from, how it developed. And so that's why I called my talk The Evolution of Open Access in High Energy Physics. And I take you a bit on the time travel, and I want to go back to the 17th century to start with. So just to put it a bit in context, at that time, New York City had barely 1,000 inhabitants, so it was a pretty small city at this time. There was a king in France called Louis XIV, quite famous nowadays. And in this time, in 1665, the first scientific journal was published. And that's the reason why I want to go back that long, because basically the scientific publishing and the processes around scientific journals are more or less unchanged for 350 years. Another context I would put you quickly on the screen is where are we operating in high energy physics, which is a very specific subject within physics. So if you just look into Wikipedia, what you'll find about high energy physics, these are all the words you find in. You see very big, it's the word Higgs, which is a famous particle which was discovered at CERN 3 years ago. And we're doing all this work at CERN with a pretty fancy machine, and I put a lot of supers on this slide. It's a super cold machine. The entire machine is cooled down to minus 271 degrees. It's pretty hot though at the same time, because in the inner core where the collisions happen, it's 100,000 times hotter than on the sun. We have a 10 times thinner vacuum than on the moon. It's pretty big, it's 27 kilometers long. So if you come to CERN, it's quite an impressive thing if you manage to visit it. And it's super fast, well, not the machine itself, but the particles in there, they travel with almost the speed of light. So that's our LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. Just a few more fancy facts around this. Again, to put it a bit in context, we have a lot of detectors built there to measure these particle collisions. And they're actually like cameras. It's just like a normal digital camera with 100 megapixel resolution, which is probably not so much, but it can take 40 million pictures a second. So it's a pretty big camera. And you may imagine that we take a lot of data. Birger was talking about data earlier today at CERN. We collect about 125 petabyte data, which are 125,000 terabytes so far with running this LHC machine. So all this results at the end in some publications. We have some papers obviously published in the field of high energy physics, but not only experimental paper from this experiment at CERN, but also a lot of theory papers. A lot of theorists around the world write about their ideas about the structure of the Standard Model, for instance. And this is how a publication looks, pretty much like any normal article. Well, actually not that normal, because if you look at the structure of the article, the actual article is barely half of the entire number of pages. Then we have obviously a few references, and then we have about 3,000 authors linked to this article. It's a nice example also for Josh's work, why it's important to have identifiers, because you may imagine it's difficult to really capture the right names of all the 3,000 authors in one article. But actually not all of the articles look like that. Luckily, about 90% of the publications in our field are only from 1 to 5 authors. This is one of them. It's a famous physicist, John Ellis, working at CERN. And by the way, only 2% of those publications come actually from CERN, because there's a very large number of these theorists around the world writing papers. Okay, enough context. Let's continue with our time travel. We are in the 60s. At that time, CERN started. CERN started with the proton synchrotron, at that time very large accelerator of 600 meters circumference, small compared to the 27 kilometers we have today. At that time, there was a famous guy in the US being President, JFK, and there were some crazy people also in the US having a festival called Woodstock. Why I'm talking about the 60s? Because that's basically where all the culture of sharing information, of sharing preprints dates back in our field in high energy physics. Because at that time, well, the state-of-the-art communication was airmail. You send a letter to somebody via an airplane. So our HEP scientists at that time, they wrote their papers. Typically, they wrote it physically on paper or a typewriter. They sent it around, they mailed it around with physical mail. Obviously, one part they sent to the journals to get accepted into publication of one of the journals. But at the same time, they sent it also to their colleagues, because they wanted to accelerate the distribution of the information. So already at that time, we had kind of preprint catalogs. Libraries created catalogs of all these sent around paper preprints from works of the high energy physicists in the world. And this is basically the birth date of open access repositories. And by the way, we still have that at CERN. Josh and the other people that might have seen it at CERN know there's a long corridor with a lot of red boxes, and there you have all the paper preprints of the past 60 years in there. So a big jump to the 1809. Why am I talking about 1989? Well, for me as a German, it's an important year because the Berlin Wall came down. And I grew up in the eastern part of Germany, so for me it was even more important. There were some pretty embarrassing guys coming up. This was New Kids on the Block. And an important year for all of us because the web was born. There was a guy at CERN, again, Tim Berners-Lee, and he had a great idea. Well, we have to do something around information sharing. Why not linking documents together, and why not creating something which describes a bit better, human readable, how a document should look like? And that was basically the start of the web. His work looked like this. You can't probably read it, but on the top you see a little comment from his boss, vague but exciting. At that time, nobody really realized what that means, but obviously it has changed all our world. And relatively soon after, those preprints that the high energy physicists had in paper form got advanced via a system called arXiv. This was basically the first open repository on the web, and physicists put their preprints directly on there. And it picked up pretty quickly. You see here a chart of the usage of high energy physics papers, published high energy physics papers, how many of them are in arXiv at the same time. And you see we are now close to 100%, and this is already the case for about 15 years. So we have now a dissemination between the distribution of information, which happens in arXiv, and the official publication, i.e. the peer review, which is still in the journals. Same time, apart from arXiv, we developed a few other infrastructure topics based on this web technology. arXiv I already mentioned. Another thing which is also to a good extent run at CERN is Inspire. It's a big database of all the searchable, citable documents that relate to high energy physics. By the way, it was the first database in the web, at that time still called Spire. We have something called Open Data, which is a new portal launched about a year ago at CERN about open data. You can see all the research data from LHC directly there on the web. You can access it yourself. Well, it's pretty big. Some of these files are a few terabytes, but you theoretically could play around with that. If we have now all this infrastructure, do actually our physicists still read journals? They don't. An analysis which was done by one of my colleagues a couple of years back shows that 9 out of 10 high energy physicists, they look on arXiv if they look for information, even though the article is published, even though the article is maybe even available because they have subscribed to the journal, they still prefer to look into arXiv because it's simply what they used to. So what is then the role of a journal in our field in high energy physics today? Well, there are two important roles still. One is quality assurance in peer review. There is certainly no real alternative to a peer review run by a publisher. There are certain alternatives currently discovered, but these are still early stages. At the moment, I think the peer review done by a publisher is still the state of the art. And we talked about it earlier, also Lars mentioned the interface with the officialdom. It is still simply required for you, if you're a young researcher and want to get recognition, you have to publish into a renowned journal. By the way, this I like these two pictures because it also shows that basically not much changed in the past 350 years. This is the Oxford Deccan 200 years ago and today. Well, now we have our peer review in the journals. We have dissemination in the archive. That's probably a concept that could work, but something is weird because we pay for this peer review by buying the content, buying the journal. Which doesn't make sense because we want to have the service, we don't want to have the content because the content we have already. It's free anyway. And then the idea was born at CERN because we know about collaborations as we built this 27-kilometer long ring. And we know about open access and about making work available because it's part of the CERN Convention, which was already written in 1953. By the way, at that time, even the people that wrote this convention in 1953, they said one part of the role of CERN is creating infrastructure for the physics community, including dissemination of information. So they were pretty much thinking ahead of their times. So we had the idea that we build a global partnership with CERN and all other institutions that we know to create open access. By reusing subscription money, at that time most of these journals, the idea dates back to the mid-2000s, most of these journals were still subscription zones. So we reuse the subscription money, which libraries already paid to the publishers anyway. We liaise with funding agencies on top because you might need some additional money on top of the subscription money. And we pay for the service we want to. We pay for the peer review and the publishing services, but not for the content, because this we have in archive. Now, another step, 2012, we had some Olympic Games in London. CERN announced the discovery of the Higgs boson. You remember this slide where Higgs was very prominent in Wikipedia. And another important change of well-established institution, the Encyclopedia Britannica, decided to stop their print issue. And we started with CERN, with SCOAP3, with the preparation of SCOAP3, using the procurement structure and all the infrastructure we have at CERN. You may imagine CERN is a pretty big research institution. We have about 10 to 12,000 people doing research at CERN. We have a big infrastructure as well for doing procurement, because we had to, for instance, build a tunnel for the LHC. So what we did is, we did a tender process. So we asked publishers for quotes if we want to get open access for their journals. They returned with a certain offer. Then we took all these offers from all the publishers, we sorted them by two criteria. We ranked them on the one side by the lowest price, by the lowest APC, the article processing charge they want to have, and by the best quality. The best quality means, for instance, the higher the impact factor of the journal, the better the quality, the more free license they are able to give us. For instance, a CC BY would be more valuable than a CC BY MC. Or the way they deliver the files for us. If we get a PDF and an XML at the same time, it's better than if we only get a PDF, for instance. And we ranked now all these journals, and we made it fit into a certain envelope, which we defined at this time with our partners. And at the end, we had a list of journals that will participate in SCOAP3, and they got assigned the contract. And these are now the journals that we have in SCOAP3. You see a list of 10 journals. You see their APC that we are paying is quite a wide range, starting from €500 for the Acta Physica up to $2,000 for the Nuclear Physics B. The interesting piece is we do not pay exactly those amounts because we have agreed with the publishers a maximum a year per year. And if they publish more articles beyond this maximum cap that we have defined, we get it for free. So for the first year of operation, for 2014, our average APC across all the journals was basically only €1,000, €1,042. How does this compare to the rest of the market? Well, we're pretty much in line with open access journals. This is a study of available PCs from open access journals. Well, it already dates back to 2014, but it's probably still relatively valid. We are far below what is offered as a hybrid option for established subscription journals. Another little step, 2014. Again, for me as a German, was a good year because we won the World Cup. There was a scientific achievement. Again, there was actually a man-made object that landed on a comet for the very first time. I think it was a pretty exciting thing. And we started SCOAP3. So how does SCOAP3 now work? And I tried to explain this as easy as possible. It's a bit simplified maybe, but I want to show you the relationship between those actors, between those stakeholders that we deal with. So I already told you we are paying APCs, we are paying article processing charges to publishers. At the same time, these publishers, they are contractually obliged to reduce the subscription to all their customers. So whatever you pay an APC for a journal, they have to reduce the same time for the same journal the subscription fee to all their customers. So they give back money to libraries. And those libraries, they are hopefully giving back the money to us as a membership fee. So we have a kind of a circle of money. We reuse more or less the same money that's existing in the system. The good thing for the researcher, for the physicist that we're talking about, well, he can basically do whatever he wants to do. He does more or less the same thing he used to do before. He reads and writes an archive. He publishes, he writes in the same journals he used to publish before. There's no change of behavior for the researcher. But he might read also occasionally from the publisher side because it's free now anyway, it's open access. But more importantly, it's also accessible for the public. Everybody now obviously can read it as it is open access. And the researcher, another good point for him is he retains his copyright. You may know in the past, in the subscription world, when somebody published in a journal, typically you have to give up the copyright to your article. This is no longer the case. They remain the copyright, and above, they don't have any cost, they don't have administrative effort. The publisher basically deals only with us, and the researcher can do whatever he wants to do, typically research. And for the libraries, for the consortia, the good thing is they can basically support open access mandates of their institutions without fresh money, or mostly without fresh money. They reuse the same funds they used to have already for the subscription. And also for them, they have no or almost no administrative effort, because as opposed to the traditional open access model where they might receive then an invoice for a few hundred articles and they have to check if this is really all correct, they just receive one invoice from us at the end of the year. They only pay one lump sum into us and we take care of the rest. That's our main goal. We want to keep scientists happy, we want to make them happy. That was not the moment when they heard about SCOAP3, that was basically when the LHC started, but it's still a nice picture. Now, after 1.5 years of operation, and after many years of preparation, we achieved already quite a lot. And you see, we started before we launched at the end of 2013. We started with about 15 members. You see, the world is still pretty gray. A lot of countries joined in 2014, including Turkey. So ULAKBİM, TÜBİTAK ULAKBİM is part of SCOAP3, and I'm really thankful for that. And we now got also a few more countries. We got Iceland and Taiwan joining this year, and Australia, hopefully in a few days. We can announce that. We are very close to have them join SCOAP3 as well. So we have 46 countries and organizations now being part of SCOAP3, representing about 3,000 libraries across the globe. So we are a truly global consortium collaboration in the meantime. And if you look at the world in this way, and this is again a slide that you have seen this morning already, this is the size of the country rated by the scientific output based on World Mapper. We see we have almost all the research intensive countries now as part of SCOAP3. So far, not absolute reason, but as of last week, we had about 8,000 articles funded so far by SCOAP3, 8,000 articles in our repository. out of which, by the way, we have 413 articles with the Turkish author. Overall, we have about 18,000 authors from 90 countries now in the meantime benefiting from Scope 3 because they can publish open access at no cost. You see there are a few countries that are not purple because they are not Scope 3 partners, but we have authors there, like for instance, you see there are still Brazil, Russia, Australia are still there. CERN currently pays for those countries. So currently CERN picks up all the share of countries which are not in part in Scope 3, but we hopefully make them join Scope 3. So we have continue our efforts to convince people to join our collaboration. One important aspect that we take very, very serious is the compliance of articles. We want to ensure that when we pay for an article, we really get what we paid for. That's why we have a weekly process where we validate all different aspects of compliance. Is it in the right format? Is it in the right license? Do we really ensure that the copyright remains with the authors? Was it delivered on time? Publishers have to deliver to us at least 24 hours after publication. Is the article relevant? Is it really a high-energy physics article? All this is checked on a weekly basis. And the nice thing is we have 99.98% compliance. Only one article out of 4,300 articles last year was not compliant. So then the question is, why do we do all these efforts? Why do we check it on a weekly basis? Well, it is not a given that you have compliance if you pay open access. This is an analysis that I took from the Wellcome Trust, kindly Bob Kirby published this in March this year. I think it was, the 3rd of March. What they did is they analyzed the compliance of their articles that they had funded as the Wellcome Trust. And you see only 61% of those articles were compliant with their mandates. Even 5% of the articles were not even open access. They were still behind the paywall. That's why we believe we really have to regularly check and validate that we really get what we pay for. So I told you we have about 8,000 articles now in the repository. Also want to quickly talk about the repository. It's a website open to everybody, obviously, as it is open access. And you can search for it via a couple of criteria, via a country, via an ORCID, via a name. But it is not really intended for the researchers. Physicists do not go there because they have the established systems anyway. They have arXiv, they have Inspire, so we don't need to replicate what is already there. This is mainly meant for our partners, for librarians, so that they can use this and look what they have supported for authors, for scientists in their institution. And for that, obviously, ORCID is a very nice and easy tool. So I want to mirror again what Josh said. With an ORCID, it's much, much easier and much more defined if you look for a certain scope for your institution, for instance. If you can search by ORCIDs, you're pretty sure that you get everything that you need. Unfortunately, we only have about 7% of our articles at the moment with an ORCID. The share, by the way, for Turkey is better. We have about 12% of the Turkish articles with an ORCID. It's great. Everything that we have, everything we have is in GitHub, so all the repository software is open source. And we have not only CERN people, but also other people contributing to that, especially partners that establish based on our repository certain additional projects. They also put it all in GitHub. And I love Scope 3, but that's actually not the message. What we did is we asked our partners, do they like Scope 3 and why do they like Scope 3? And luckily we got exactly that answer. Most of them, they really love Scope 3. So I quickly summarize a way to show what are really the benefits for the different communities that we serve. One is the libraries. Libraries, they like Scope 3 because one of us, they can repurpose their subscriptions. They can get open access without the additional new money. It's participative. We have a big participative governance. We have, for instance, a governing council, which is the highest governing body in Scope 3, where all the partners are represented. All the countries come to CERN once or twice a year, and we discuss the strategy about Scope 3. In December, we have the next governing council, and I hope that we also can welcome again the Turkish representative. It is global, so it's also a nice networking tool. We have really a community built up, and people talk about not only Scope 3, but also all their day-to-day issues that they have if they meet. We offer some nice tools for our partners. We have, for instance, an API where the partners can directly link with our repository and can automatically then get, whenever there's a new article available for their institution, they can automatically push it into their institutional repository. We support things like ORCID, and we support a lot of more different search options. For instance, also country consortia can search for their country, etc. Why do the funding agencies actually like it? Because they support us. We have a lot of funding agencies giving us money on top of the redirected subscription money. Well, for them, it's a really, really good value for money, and I'll explain you in a moment why. It's also very low overhead. Similar to the universities, they only get one invoice from us at the end of the year. They don't need to worry about all the different numbers of articles that are funded. We solve the problem of co-authorship. I showed you at the beginning these articles with about 3,000 authors. You might imagine it's really difficult to allocate an APC to the right author if you have such a large number of scientists involved. So with this, we solve automatically co-authorship because we centrally allocate based on a certain key. And again, it's global, so they can align with other funding agencies in the rest of the world. And I wanted to tell you why it's good value of money for them. You see here again the same chart, and I just put in 4 lines with more or less recent average numbers of APCs that got paid. So you see our average number last year was 1,042 euro. The average of German universities, it's based on some publicly available numbers that you can get on GitHub. It's about 1,200 euro. It's still a pretty good value, but a bit higher than what we are paying. If you look at the average of all the UK higher education universities, that's quite a high amount. They pay about 2,400 euro. And the Wellcome Trust, again, they pay about 2,500 euro a year, in average. So you see, we are about 25% of what the Wellcome Trust is ready to pay. Well, actually not, because if you consider that we repurpose the subscription money, we only use a small amount new money, the large amount existing money. Our actually average price in terms of new money that had to be paid by a funding agency is about only 25% of our 1,000 euro. So actually the net new money that people have to have to put into the fund for a Scope 3 article is about only 250 euro per article. And that's why the funding agencies really love it. And I also talked about the nice and efficient operation, why funding agencies like it. Well, we have 46 countries, we have 3,000 libraries. You may imagine this is a bit of an effort to coordinate all of that. On the other hand, we have 11 publishers, also they want to get some attention. We have a relatively lean team in the middle. It's only me, 1 technical guy and 2 students, so in total about 4 people that manage the entire operation. And by the way, all this is paid by CERN, so nobody from our partners needs to pay for the operation. All the money that we collect from our partners is 100% used for paying APCs, for paying for content. And why do scientists like it? Well, for them it's no cost. They don't pay anything. They have no administration, they don't need to care about anything. There's no change, they just do what they used to do, they do research. So if everybody likes it, what do we do next? We continue with Scope 3. The initial phase of Scope 3, which started 1st of January 2014, was initially built only for 3 years as a kind of a pilot. And now the Governing Council, the highest governing body that I told you, decided in June this year that we want to continue for another 3-year period. So we're currently in the preparation process of another 3-year period. You may imagine it's quite some work. We have to find new agreements with the publishers and with all our partners. But as of January 2017, we hopefully will start with Scope 3 Phase 2. Just a few words at the end around open data, because this is kind of the next step that CERN is now going. I mentioned briefly the Open Data Portal, which launched about a year ago. And I can really encourage you to go there, because it has 2 main purposes. One is for the real high-energy physicists, for the researchers. They can access the LHC data. They can access all the raw data and do their own analysis with it. But it's only one part of it. The other part is also an educational part. There are some nice simulators so you can play around, even if you're not a physicist. You can play around with the data and can simulate some collisions and can adjust a little bit, tweak a little bit the parameters and see what happens with particle collisions. And besides my main job, I'm also a CERN guide, so I show around tourist groups at CERN. And just had a recent school group, I think they were 15 or 16 years old. And when I showed them around CERN, suddenly this one young boy said, well, actually, I already did some experiments myself. I already know exactly how this works with the collision, because I used this open data portal and played around with myself. I found it a perfect example. It was a 15, 16-year-old boy that already knows more about particle physics probably than I do, because he used these educational tools that we now have on the web. But not only for the education, it's also great for the research. We actually found out that with this open data, making all these data available, research groups all over the world, they found each other, they used the data, and they basically created something new which wasn't there before. So it really helps accelerating science, which, by the way, is the slogan of CERN, accelerating science. So to summarize, why I actually think SCOAP3 is successful. Well, one part, it involved from this long history of a collaborative and data sharing, research sharing model that we have in high energy physics. So it was relatively easy to convince the research community because they're used to this anyway. It was still a fairly long journey. So all the preparation of SCOAP3 started in 2005. So it took us 9 years to get there, but finally we succeeded. Now we really succeeded, and I believe this because we are getting the lowest average APCs in the market for high established, well-renowned journals. We reuse subscription money, so only a very small fraction, about 25% of the money that we need, is from either CERN, which puts in for the members that are not, or for the countries that are not members yet, or funding agencies. 75% comes from our members as redirected subscription money. We are almost 100% compliant, so we really get full open access immediately, 24 hours after publication. We have this global consensus building process. We have a global participative governance, which I think is an important step to make this really happen, because everybody feels part of it. And we have additional initiatives like the open data portal that supports this. So I think for the high energy physics world and for CERN, we pretty much succeeded with open access in our world. Thank you very much.